Okay, so we're recording to the cloud. All right, so I have too many things. I had too many things open on my screen. I'm looking for the, here we go, the script. Okay. Basically, this is, welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of April 9th. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel, and this meeting is being conducted remotely. The town of Lunenburg, in response to the COVID-19, is currently following the guidance from the Lunenburg Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent the spread, and all town facilities are currently closed to the public. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, all public meetings are being conducted remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town website on the COVID-19 Information Center page, accessed through the town manager's webpage, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. If you're unable to provide public comment through Zoom or through the online feature, we will be taking public comment at the end of the meeting. So if you want to send an email to tbirchfield, BURCHFIELD, at lunenburgonline.com, then I'll look for and read the public comment at the end of the meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and that take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. And as we turn to the first items on the agenda, just going to cover just a few things to make sure that everybody understands what we're doing. I will yield the floor to anyone who raises their hand in the Zoom participant list. So if you do want to be recognized, please raise your hand. Again, the Finance Committee members are all unmuted. Because we will be doing some screen shares of documents and I won't necessarily see the hands raised during the presentation of information, please feel free to interrupt verbally if you need to. Not having done this before, I'm not sure if it will work just to look for the hand in the participant log. And again, any vote that we might take at this meeting will be taken with a roll call vote. With that, on our agenda tonight, we were going to review the current draft of the warrant articles. But first we were going to start with the review of changes in the town manager's recommendations for the budget. I believe that you wanted to go there first. Is that true, Heather?
Yeah, Peter.
Or does it matter?
Yeah, can I just make an out of sequence comment here?
Yeah, oh, sure. Go ahead, Peter.
So in the selectmen's meeting on Tuesday night, which I believe came after the agenda for this meeting was posted, the town manager announced that at next week's selectmen's meeting, there'll be a discussion and likely a vote regarding the extension of fourth quarter tax payments from the first week of May. I don't know the exact date they're due until roughly the 1st of June. And I recognize the fact that everybody's kind of operating in emergency mode and the selectmen are taking action as they deem necessary. But I do think that at least a cash flow discussion and the effects of that, and also, to some degree, the broader fairness issues associated with this probably warrant some discussion on the part of the Finance Committee. So if that is not part of the town manager and finance director's regular report, I would like to propose that we discuss this as a committee off agenda due to the nature of the timing of the announcement.
Okay, so Heather, can we take that up at the end?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Then how would you like to start?
We can start with the worksheets, the two that I sent.
Which one would you like to start with?
Let's start with the adjustments.
Where'd it go? Well, I thought I was sharing my screen, but I don't seem to be.
Terry, the meeting warrant
We're looking at a warrant
screen is up.
screen. Yeah.
Oh, that's why. All right, all right.
There it is.
Yeah, I just had to remember where I hit it. And I didn't realize that when this happened, I was going to still see you guys over there on the side, so it was kind of interfering with my ability to get this up here. Is that large enough to see?
It is.
Oop, too little.
I'm sorry?
No, that's good. So I can explain. So as you may recall, gave I'm using Peter's words, a dashboard effective the changes in the budget. So this is a reflection of the changes since the recommended budget, as last known pre-COVID-19. And so the changes made on the revenue side were further reductions in new growth from 193,400 to 130,000, which is a $63,400 reduction. And this is essentially, I don't have any numbers yet from the regional assessing firm, which I should have by next week, or so I'm told. And so this figure is strictly based on doing a historical look back at new growth and plugging in our worst year, which was in 2010 of about 130,000 in new growth. The second reduction in revenue is the state aid number. And so that is reducing it to the fiscal 20 amount. So level funding, state aid. Right now, do not have a projection from the state. They were supposed to have a roundtable discussion on Tuesday, and due to technical difficulties, had to postpone that. And that
Hey guys, we're getting a feedback loop. If you guys can mute your lines if you're not talking just on your own, I think it might help.
there. Gary, maybe you can mute. Okay, all set. So the state aid is a level funded amount from fiscal 20. So that's a further reduction of $211,836. Like I said, that's unknown at this point. We don't have direction from the state right now on the state aid number. The local receipts number is a level funded number as well from our current local receipts estimate. And that's a further reduction of $68,454.26. And because we've budgeted conservatively, estimated conservatively, this, I feel, as well as Karen, this is a safe number at this point to use. So like I said in last week's meeting, my first go around would be to eliminate the new positions and additional hours. And that's what is reflected in under the expenditure side. as well as on March 12th, we had indicated that we would be able to adjust the allowance for abatements amount. So that provides an additional 55,000 on the or reduction on the expenditures, which can go towards the operating. So that's reducing it from 175,000 estimate to 120,000. So with those potential changes, that would leave a deficit of around $30,000. And this is not making any changes to any other budgets or the capital plan at this moment. This is just a first go around, but I think it needs a more balanced approach. I've had discussions with the superintendent and business manager, myself and the finance director about what proposed budgets, just so we can see impact, and those numbers would be forthcoming.
Okay, I did end up muting everybody, so if anybody has any questions, if you want to do the raise hand on the participant log, that would be helpful. Seeing none, then we can move on
I
to
think
the
Peter's
next
raising
spreadsheet.
his hand.
Oh, is he? Where is Peter?
You might have to scroll down, Terry.
Who the heck is he? I don't even see him.
I'm hiding on you, Terry.
Oh, you moved up. Okay, so I see both Dave and Peter. All right, well, Peter, you had muted yourself, so you're fine. You can go first.
Okay. Is there a plan to reconvene the capital planning committee to discuss potential cuts to the capital plan? I mean, I think we all have some opinions, but I would prefer to defer any action there to the capital planning committee in terms of reprioritizing, or do we just start looking at cutting from the bottom of that list?
So I emailed the capital planning committee this afternoon to set up a meeting for next week
Okay, good.
for that purpose. And it's really so they can review their prioritizations. Given that there might be a potential, I would recommend a lower allowance for capital.
I mean, one thought that immediately comes to mind here is that I think we discussed this last week. With the hiring of the additional officer, we're at that trigger point for to carry an additional cruiser, which we were paying for, I believe, out of this year's capital plan. If we're deferring that hire for a year, should we defer the capital for a year as well?
Well,
this isn't a final recommendation as far as.
I understand that, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think there's sort of a tie between the two of them to a degree. I mean, the police chief may make an argument that we still need the car or the cruiser without the officer for whatever reason. But I think that deserves a proper hearing.
And I've already had that conversation with the police chief as well. Yeah. So, and he understands it.
okay. Michelle, you have your hand up?
Yeah, it was just a quick question. Were you saying that you were going to the superintendent to see if she could find any changes in her budget?
Yes. So they were going to go back and see the impact of eliminating new positions as well and what that would be. So probably different scenarios of the budget, and then hopefully adding back in.
Sure. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the next one,
Yes.
which is the revenue and expenses worksheet.
Yeah. So this is just a summary of all the totals that reflect, and forgive the heading. That's my label right now for the current budget. So it's just a synopsis of the changes from what it was a month ago. And the same bottom lines you'll see in the adjustments.
Do we have the numbers that you included for the changes in local aid? Does that reflect any kind of direction from the state, or is that purely a?
No direction.
Okay.
We've been given no indication of what the impact will be.
Yeah, I think probably, yeah, given the fact that it's going to be a big unknown until they're able to restructure all of their forecasts based on the however many people are unemployed for however long that is true.
Right.
So,
And how much, yeah, the rainy day fund they'll use and so on.
right. Any questions at all on this sheet? Dave?
Yeah, I was just wondering, looking at the sheet, there's some blank sections. I'm assuming that those numbers had not been finalized, so they're not showing up in this, unless I'm reading something wrong. Cemetery improvements, access capital expense. I know some of these don't affect the budget, but TC Passios design engineering 265, is that taken out of there or?
No, so you're looking at the FY20 column.
Right, but is that going to carry over, or what are you going to do with that money as you move into 21?
Yeah, no decisions have been made on that yet.
Okay, and any of those other numbers that would,
And that was
Carry-
already appropriated money. Yeah.
right, yep, okay, thank you.
Was there an expectation that there was supposed to be an additional appropriation for the TC Passios, or was that a one-year appropriation?
The only additional appropriation would be when the committee went to the town for funding for the construction.
Okay, but there's no additional expectation for architectural services or anything
No.
beyond another trigger point from town meeting?
The construction funding would include final design.
Okay.
Yeah. So that the 265 includes up to the point where we have firm estimates with specification, with all the materials that are going to be used, et cetera.
And that money that will be spent in the current fiscal year, even though there will be invariably services rendered in the next fiscal year, is that the idea there?
Right now, the project's on hold. The firm was contacted to say, due to the current situation, we've put this on hold. So we will have to convene at some point with the firm and the building committee on how that's going to proceed.
And if I understand it correctly, that's an authorization from town meeting, and that can carry over into
Yes.
next year or the year after.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's already, it's kind of money set aside.
Okay. It won't revert into free cash, basically.
No.
Okay.
None unless it was reappropriated.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. It could be rescinded at town meeting. That authorization could be rescinded and move that money somewhere else. That's one option.
Any other comments, questions about this part? Or we just wait until next week when we have, hopefully we have a little bit more information.
This is good information. Looking forward to hearing from the Capital Planning Committee.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to, does anybody have any general questions on the budget information as presented here before we get into the particulars of the warrant? Okay, then I'll share the warrant. Actually, I should ask, every time I pull up the participant list, does that show up on my screen as well, or is it just showing the document?
Right now it's showing, do you want to close
Yeah.
all tabs?
The participant screen, only you can see. We all have the ability to pull up our own version of that.
Okay. Well, no, that was fine. I was just, because I'm putting it in the middle of everything, so, all right, let me go back to sharing this screen. Okay. All right, and at this point, you should see the warrant. Is that there?
It
Yes.
is.
Okay. Heather, you want to talk us through?
Where do you want to start? So,
Well, I'm going to start at A.
okay.
Tell me where to go.
There's the typical articles. So A through, so A, B,
Okay, so B is going to be revolving funds.
yes. So we're
right.
required to vote that every year, the spending limits.
Yep.
Right, C is going to be prior year expenses that we don't know if we have any yet,
Right.
but that's the current year. Okay.
D,
Do we actually, I should ask, are we anticipating any unanticipated expenses that are not going to be something that are going to be covered by emergency funds being made available?
So, can you repeat that?
Oh, I'm sorry, my phone's way the heck over there. I thought maybe that was what was causing the problem. Are you anticipating any unanticipated expenses related to all of the closures and any spending that you had to do that might potentially not be addressed by the special funding coming down from the federal and state governments?
So that is on the selectmen's meeting on Tuesday. That's on their agenda. So due to discussions that Karen and I have had about creating a unique account where those expenses can be put, and that will make it, it's been a recommendation from the state to do so because it will make it that much easier when we go to apply for reimbursement, that they're segregated from other accounts, that they're only related to COVID-19 related expenditures. So we're required, the board is, to vote on that to allow emergency expenditures related to this public health crisis.
Okay. And I'm just curious if that might be something that we end up seeing here in item C.
No. No.
That would be dealt with completely differently.
Right.
Okay. All right, so then D would be
Adjustments to the current fiscal year.
Mhm.
It's a typical article. E is the ratification for the first year, the police union agreement.
Oh, can I ask a question about that? Is there going to be a dollar associated with this? A dollar amount, or is it just to accept the agreement?
The ratification is to appropriate money, and the dollar amount is zero because it's still zero. That there was no additional funds needed for the first year.
Okay, good.
But council revisited the issue, and even though it's a $0, it still has to be voted.
Okay.
But if I may, in the second and third years, there is additional money?
Yes. Yep. And I made that part of my presentation at the special town meeting about those costs.
All right.
John, my understanding is once the first year is approved by town meeting, then the other 2 years are automatically accepted and they're built into the budget under salaries rather than salary reserve.
I would, but that was the decision we made prior to this unsettling time. And I just wondered how much effect it would have on the out year budgets. But I can chase that down.
And I'm sure I can get that information for everyone readily.
super.
So the F is the capital plan for fiscal 21. So it's just a generic article at this point. G is for the fiscal 21 budget. H and I are for funding the first year of the two unions, one being the clerical union and the other being the firefighters union.
Are those negotiations ongoing at this time, or are they
Right
recessed?
now they're on pause.
Okay, thank you.
So they're on pause, so they may not be ready?
They may not be ready.
Okay.
Do these have to be separate articles, or are we permitted to just kind of create a set-aside fund for collective bargaining?
They'd have to be separate. In my experience.
Yeah, they're all separate agreements and they go multi-year, so.
Yeah, but the contracts aren't settled. So if we have $4 and we want to give, we agree to $3 with one union and $1 with the other. This doesn't give the town the negotiating power that it ought to have. Is that a logical conclusion?
It's probably a logical conclusion, and it's probably because of the way that the state regs are set up. I'm not sure how much movement there is in there, but then a lot of the, there's probably a lot of reasons why it's set up that way, but yeah, you're right, it doesn't benefit the town. Although, in terms of the negotiating position, it probably has no effect on the town.
Okay, I mean, if you don't think it affects the negotiating position, then it's a moot point. My question was coming from a leverage standpoint or a negotiating standpoint.
On the other
Yeah.
hand, there is a possibility that there could be an agreement before town meeting, and if you don't have it on there, then you don't have it to vote on. The other thing being keeping them separate like this. If town meeting has a serious problem with one of the agreements, they vote it down, it goes back to negotiation. And I think
Okay.
for that reason only,
So
that reason alone, it should be individual.
So this assumes that the negotiation is finalized before town meeting, where this is not a set aside in the event that the negotiation is not
Right.
completed. Okay,
No.
I misunderstood. All right.
The vote is to
Pardon me.
appropriate money or transfer money to fund the first year.
Okay. Pardon me. I'm still pulling my new guy card. I got a whole year. To do that.
Wow.
I don't know, some of us have taken 8 or 9.
Okay. J
Go ahead,
is
John.
the stabilization fund.
And I have a question on that. That just is geared toward taking a stabilization fund to the bare minimum required by policy, right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, that's the 5%.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
K is the OPEB trust fund to transfer a sum of money from free cash into that fund.
And on that one, I do know there is some interest in that being skipped or reduced to a very small amount this year, depending on what the final analysis comes out when you and Karen are done going through the whole process.
Oh, can I
Well, I know
interject
that
something here?
Go ahead.
Just real quickly, because this came up with the accountants who did the audit. And Heather, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the more we contribute to OPEB, the better reduction we get in the liability. There's a reduction we get with the more we contribute based on the percentage.
Right.
So you probably can explain it much better than I can, but
I
there's
can't.
there's a benefit for doing as much as we can. We get a reduction. It saves us money to spend money.
I would defer to Karen Brochu if she's still on the line. I can't see her, but that's right, Michelle. And as well as it's a good indicator for going out to bid when we're going out for our bond rating.
I think it's the discount rate that they use when they do the actuarial. The more money that we have put aside into the actual fund, the more funding that we have done, the better the discount is when they calculate the overall liability. So the more we fund, the lower our liability would be calculated at.
Right, and I understand, like, I understand the wanting to look at how we use the free cash that we would be using to make those contributions from, and it may be that we'll see if more of that is required to be used in order to support the capital plan, so that the operating budget can be better supported. But on the other hand, not knowing what the effect is for this year and potentially the year after, it might not be a good year to not use the free cash for, I don't know how free cash is going to be looking going forward, and I know you haven't finished doing your forecasting, so that might be good information to have as we're looking at whether or not, to what extent the trust funds are supported. But certainly, given if we can keep to the policy that we set for the OPEB trust fund, that also puts us in better stead with our bond ratings.
Yes.
Yes, and it's tied to a percentage too, our policy. So as a certified free cash, if it is reduced, it's a percentage of that amount going forward.
Right. Right.
L through O are related to the sewer commission.
Do we still need to schedule to hear from the sewer commission because we haven't yet. So is that something that we're going to want to do in the next couple of weeks, or?
Yes. But they still have to meet to finalize their budget.
Okay.
And
Okay.
But how many
on
meetings do we have?
Tuesday.
How many meetings do we have before public hearing?
The public hearing's May 7th. So 1, 2, 3,
Three?
4, 5.
Okay.
5.
We have 5 more meetings before that?
Oh, sorry.
No,
4.
3.
4.
I want to say 3.
Yeah, because
Oh, no.
today's is the 9th.
Mhm.
16th, 23rd, and 30th.
Okay. So we would need to hear from them in one of the next 3 weeks. Do we know if they've already scheduled their meeting? Actually, I should probably, maybe if I unblock.
They're on the calendar for next week, is it? Or is it this week?
Tuesday.
Okay. So then we'll try to get them on the calendar within the next couple, well, not next week, but maybe the week after, or week after that.
Yeah. And I think I had last week suggested maybe keep it to a similar schedule as we had before. They were scheduled to be the meeting before the public hearing.
Okay, so we'll do that then. So if they're available on the 30th, then we'll hopefully we'll be able to schedule them for that night.
If I may,
Yes.
on Article M, sum of money to operate the sewer enterprise fund for FY21. Any idea how much that will be, even if it's just a range? So I get an idea of what kind of money we're looking for here. We're looking at here.
Well, since that's all going to be tied to, that's not going to be tied to the town budget.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay. But we operate as a backdrop,
Right.
guarantor for that. So I just wondered how much the town, how much, I guess I'm going down the risk path now because this whole situation we're in right now, many people are unemployed. I don't know if that's going to affect the sewer's revenue or not.
Cash flow.
Cash flow. Yeah, cash flow is better term.
Well, that would be an interesting question to
The sewer fund.
raise with the sewer commission.
Okay.
I know that I think, well, actually I don't know, but I did see a meeting at some point when they were talking about their rates and the changes in costs from one of the towns in particular, but we'll hear them when we hear them.
Yep.
Okay, so, and again, because I forget that I'm sharing my screen, if I start zipping around, please, tell me to stop. I'm making you sick. All right, so I've popped on to N. That's also sewer commission.
Yes.
Mhm, yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. So you said all the way through O. So then we go to P.
That's the solid waste disposal program. That's the enterprise to operate
Okay.
curbside.
Mhm.
Q is the water enterprise. And R and S are for public access.
Mhm.
T is to add certain positions that were approved by the personnel committee into the salary administration plan grid.
Right. We heard this from PAC when they presented.
Yes.
So these are not new positions. These are positions that are being moved into the salary administration plan.
Right. Particularly for the cable access, they were being paid as contractors, and
Right.
now they're being paid as employees.
If they are being paid as employees rather than contractors, does that make them, does that save the town any money?
That's all paid through the PAC enterprise
Oh,
fund.
they're paying them price fund anyway. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll accept for any potential costs down the road, but because they're not full-time employees, there was that we didn't expect that to be an issue.
Yep.
That's a question. I'm trying to remember now, but I thought that was not going to be an issue.
Okay.
But have they gone through the process of kind of backing out the contractor carrying costs here? Like,
They're covering all employer costs, related costs.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess that's my question is that is ultimately costing them more to do that because we're paying payroll, unemployment, all the additional burdens that go with an employee.
Only unemployment if they filed unemployment, because we're a pay
Pay as you go.
Yeah, pay as you go community.
Okay.
Okay.
U is for that's the selectmen's article regarding their goal about the old primary school. So there's no dollar figure associated with that right now.
And there's
We
no,
anticipate one by the meeting.
Hopefully, we have not discussed that since everything's happened.
Okay. V.
V is the one for the library trust funds. And that year came and explained.
mhm.
Right. W is to hear an interim report from the TCP Building Design Committee and/or representatives. So the firm.
Does that mean that the town could vote no and then we won't hear one?
I guess.
Actually, that's correct.
Okay.
X is the animal bylaw. There needs to be a change because it needed to reflect what is allowable by law. Our bylaw was not in sync with the state law.
Is there bound to be any discussion on this?
There always is discussion about
I'm
dogs.
sure.
Well, I guess what I wasn't sure of was whether or not there's anybody that we want to invite to be available on the night of the public hearing.
The police chief could answer those questions.
Okay. We don't necessarily need him to make a presentation as much as to be available to answer questions, I think.
Okay. Y is related to that. regarding the penalties and for offenses. Z is the Community Preservation Act that was submitted by the Historical Commission.
Mhm.
Rebecca Lantry, she
Yep.
gave a very good presentation at the Selectmen's meeting on Tuesday, if you're able to watch that. And there'll be materials put up.
Yes, ma'am.
What's our game plan on that, Terry? We had talked about watching their presentation and then perhaps bringing them in for questions. Are we still playing by that plan, or?
Well, we could actually, if you would like to, we can invite her to come in advance of the public hearing, but she would definitely be presenting the night of the public hearing, I would think. But because it is a rather long presentation, I don't know what would your pleasure be? Would it be to hear her before and have some discussion before the public hearing, or wait for the public hearing?
My preference is to invite her to a meeting prior to the public meeting, so we can have a more of a question and answer session.
I would support that too, John. I did see it during the select board meeting, and there is a lot of discussion that goes with it.
Yep.
I'd also, when you're watching the selectmen's meeting, there are documents that they were referring to that we don't have visibility of on TV. So there's a translation issue that I think would benefit at least me personally to understand the phases and all that kind of, or the rounds or whatever it is.
Heather, do
Yeah.
you think she would come?
Oh, yes, I'm sure she would.
Okay, so then do we want her on the 23rd or the 30th?
Maybe the 23rd.
Okay.
Could we also ask that she provide us the materials?
I can send what she sent to the select board, and as soon as I can get it up on the website. So
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be good.
Thank you.
The other thing is that I know that I had looked at this a long time ago. I can't remember why. I had, the website information was pretty good, but I just remember thinking at the time that I can't remember if we discussed it in the finance committee at the time. Thinking that, it would be nice if we could do a community preservation act or create a fund that didn't have to be tied to the tax stuff, but I guess that's the way that you get the state contributions, so.
Mhm.
But it also prompted in me a question of, it would be interesting, I think, to see, one of the things that throws me is that our income levels are so high that we have to pay more for Monty Tech, but we have such a large population of people who are retired. I want to know how come our data is so skewed that our income levels are much higher than it feels. And I don't know if there's a way to tease that out of a DOR report or if there's demographics somehow through the Planning Commission. But it's interesting to me that given we didn't qualify for a lot of the school funding, we didn't qualify for, or we ended up taking a big hit the other way. And Peter, a lot of this is also prompted by the information that we're looking for from the delegation in terms of the support for the spending act that they did for education. Although it will be interesting to see what they end up funding for next year, given all of the changes here. So
is the CPR though? Is there an income calculation included in the CPR? Is that a variable in that calculation, or is
no, not the CPA? You mean?
I'm sorry, the CPA, right?
Yeah. No, it's not. It's all based on property. It's all based on property. But again, like we have a lot of people who are in the position of being land rich and cash poor. But then on the other hand, we have a situation where our income average is so high that it throws us off someplace else. So it's interesting to me, the way that the income has to break out in order to accommodate a really large retirement population. And, you know, and I don't think I'm the one that's skewing the data personally, but
No, I think
it would be interesting to see.
I think your point is well taken. The only other question that I had that did not, the one question that I had that did not come up the other night was when she mentioned that there's a first $100,000 exemption in terms of the way the surcharge is calculated. It excludes the first $100,000 per property. And I was curious about, kind of relative to your, property rich scenario, is there a separate accounting for in use, land that's in chapter or not? And I wasn't able, that wasn't clear to me how that's calculated.
That would be interesting to hear as well.
Because we have a lot of landowners that have a lot of land that's still, in use, that obviously they're not paying much in taxes, but I don't know if it's a direct correlation for the CPA surcharge.
Right. Okay, so that'll be interesting to hear, and hopefully if she can come on the 23rd, then we'll do that on the 23rd. We have sewer on the 30th. Our lives are just getting so exciting. Okay. Double A. That always makes me nervous to see a double A.
Definitely. That is the green communities for the streetlights, converting the streetlights to LED.
All right. At this particular point, what's the funding source for the LED fixtures?
It would have to be from the operating taxable tax revenues or free cash.
Okay, but I remember, and I could be remembering this wrong, that the earlier discussions were, we thought that we had a surplus that we would be able to use for that, but then that disappeared. Is that correct?
Yes.
That we had unappropriated funds that no longer exist?
At our March 12th meeting, we had a surplus of about 63,000 in the bottom line, and we were talking about the allowance for abatements number also decreasing, which was reflected tonight. So.
Okay, so that must be what I was thinking about. Okay, so that's gone now. So we would have to actually try to find another place to get that if that was voted up.
And we do have a balance of free cash that's not allocated to anywhere, but the plan was to make that roll over for next year's free cash, or to address, if needed, the snow and ice budget for this year.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think we need to take a hard look at this because the savings and the payback is only, what was it, Heather, 5 years on the entire project?
It was 2.5 for just converting, I think, for Unitil to convert, and I think it was a little bit longer for us taking ownership.
Right. So either proposal, if I remember correctly, it was 3 years or less on either way that you went. And then Dave Blatt will, I'm sure, give us the savings numbers going forward from that point. And it's pretty substantial.
Okay.
So I would assume you want him to come before.
I think we should get another presentation from him for at least for the
They didn't have a final recommendation the last time that we.
Yes, they did.
Them. They did?
Yes.
Okay,
It was purchased outright.
Okay.
Yeah, he had presented to the Board of Selectmen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Board of Selectmen asked that the article be put in kind of generic, so it could go either way.
Okay, that's why. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, then we can ask Dave to come out. All right, and then we get into so the
Double
planning board.
B is the earth removal bylaw, and that is strictly changing just selectmen to planning board throughout the bylaw. And so they put 2 articles related to this. So in the event, first go, take this one up, and hopefully that just one change would occur. To that be under the authority of the planning board instead of the selectmen. And CC is to change the bylaw.
Mhm.
So if,
Okay, so basically their concern was that if the whole bylaw doesn't get adopted, at least the planning board would be the board dealing with the implementation or the making sure that it was implemented appropriately.
yes, and that's what we've been working towards for a number of years.
Okay.
And DD.
I haven't, where is DD?
Lot of paper on that planning board proposal.
My God.
We're killing a lot of
Here we go.
trees.
Oh, these are the ones that were taken out. Okay.
Yes. There's 4 first right of refusal articles. So
Mhm.
those 4 articles, the selectmen removed on Tuesday.
Yep.
At that meeting,
I'm sorry. DD is the land in front of the public safety building, and E through H8 are the first right of refusal articles.
Terry,
Okay.
quick comment.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, public comment after that meeting. I was quite disappointed that, again, open space was not given this information and allowed to weigh in on it before they made their votes. Looking into these properties further, there probably would have been no recommendation from them to go after any of these properties. But errors have been made in the past, losing access to other town property by selling lots. And there had been a promise from the select board, previous select board, at a joint meeting of the Open Space Committee, that they would make sure that Open Space got a chance to review any of these proposals, and it did not happen.
Yeah, it did happen actually, Dave. All 4 were sent to Brandon.
Were they discussed in an open meeting? Because I wasn't aware of any of them.
We received no response, and it was followed up in a follow-up email as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That information was not available.
Okay. Peter?
Was there a conclusion to the negotiation on the Mass Ave property?
That's why the article was on the.
But the article assumed that a dollar value for that property had been arrived at between the Board of Selectmen and the property owner. Is that correct?
Yes, but it also includes, it was what the owner was willing to pay to sell it for, as well as the cost included to demolish the building and put the road in.
So it was an all-in cost, not just the property acquisition.
Yes.
Okay. My question / comment is, I support removing this from the warrant, given the circumstances that we're living under right now. I don't know if there's somebody else negotiating with the owner of that property right now. I don't know that if perhaps given the change in circumstances that we're all living under right now, the town might be able to go back and renegotiate a right of first refusal on that property. My sense is that, number one, all along, the intent was that the funding source here would be regular borrowing. Now that we have a little bit of runway on this, is there the possibility that we could go and negotiate for that property contingent upon a debt exclusion that we could go for in conjunction with a special town meeting in the fall.
I don't think that it precludes that from happening. It would all depend on our financial situation, of course, but it would have to be voted at a special town meeting and an election for debt exclusion. So.
But I mean, this is right back to the point that Dave has been making, and I've seconded all along for the last 6 months, which is why do we keep finding ourselves in this cycle where we're going to go and acquire property? A deal has been, essentially agreed to contingent upon a town meeting vote, but our only option is regular borrowing. And then if it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass, and somebody else buys the property. We happen to be in a unique circumstance right here. With unique circumstances, with crises, sometimes come opportunities. And I would recommend to you and to the Board of Selectmen that we pursue that avenue. Because right now, frankly, our operating budget is going to be severely constrained for the next 2 or 3 years. But the voters in town, I think, have an opportunity to say, I'll take a fraction of a percent of additional cost to take care of that eyesore in front of the public safety building. And I think that's a legitimate conversation for the citizens of Lunenburg to be able to have, given the opportunity provided to them by yourself and the Board of Selectmen.
If I could add to that, Peter, just to throw one quick number out there, a 1-year debt exclusion for $300,000, which is what I had looked at for the Saliva property, would add 18 cents per thousand to the tax rate for 1 year. So I'm not sure what the price is on this. It's probably double that, say 36 cents per thousand for 1 year, and it could be done as a 1-year debt exclusion.
Yeah, it could be done as a 1 year, it could be done as a 7 year. I mean, money's cheap right now. I understand you and I have a philosophical disagreement on interest, but suffice to say, I think that this is a conversation that we owe ourselves.
Yep, I agree.
Okay. So actually, it would be, it also comes at an interesting time for sure. So, because we do have the fall town meeting coming, we probably will have a fall town meeting.
What's the appropriate course of action on this, Heather? Is it for myself or somebody else to come to the Board of Selectmen and ask for this negotiation to be reopened? Or is this something that you or another member of the Board of Selectmen could perhaps take the initiative on?
I'm not saying the police chief and I are giving up on this by any means. It's just, and hopefully the board, when it's, would support it when we brought it back before them. It's just the timing.
Well, I think part of it's the time, and again, that would be an interesting thing to look at going forward as to whether or not we could bring it up that way. I think the concern would be whether or not there's a way to bring it up so that either option would be available, because if the town voted down a debt exclusion but would have accepted it with the regular borrowing, I'm not sure that you want to. So that, which would be an interesting discussion to have. I think it would be. The other thing is that if they do the CPA, then then we could use that money.
That's a potential although that's probably got a longer time to access that money, since we're just at the point where we approve it. But I think that's a legitimate point.
Right, and all of those funding options could be included in one article, and then town meeting chooses from the funding source.
Yeah. Interesting.
I just, purely editorial comment and purely my own position as one town meeting voter, given the current financial circumstances, I'm a no on regular borrowing for that property. I think we have to, we can't be telling our school department that they can't buy paper for their copy machines, but we can go buy an eyesore of a property because we don't like the look in front of the public safety building. And I understand there's other reasons, but on the other hand, if people are willing to pay an extra couple of bucks to pay for that building, then that's a whole other circumstance, which I support, and I'm willing to pay that money.
The other thing, while we're on the subject of that property, there's a lot of concern about comparing comps in the general area of properties that have sold over the past few years with actually quite a lot more acreage, but still frontage on 2A. And the number that was floated the first time around with that property was way out of whack with the comps.
What's the status? Is the information relative to the number that would have been put in this article, is that public information at this point? The negotiation was complete. There was some calculation, but to my knowledge, that information was never made public, or is that included in recent minutes that were approved?
I'd have to go back to that meeting but I believe that amount was, so I don't want to say before I go back and check.
Okay, fair enough. And I obviously don't want you to reveal something you can't. So.
Right, and I think the other thing is that as we have the whole discussion around, and this would be a good discussion to have around the whole notion of the CPA, would be if we did have the CPA, then a lot of these discussions wouldn't be coming up down the road. So I know that there's going to be some discussion around whether or not the town's prepared to go for 3% or 1% or 2%, or whether they're wanting to go for it at all since they turned it down. Actually, I should take that back. Did the town turn it down before?
I think twice.
Yeah, it was in the early 2000s, 01, 02, 03, that time frame.
Mhm.
All right, and then the last article, it has to do with another all alcohol off premise.
That was a citizen's petition from Jack's.
Oh, so that they can sell. Does Jack's already not sell alcohol? They don't sell alcohol at Jack's, right?
Yep, they're looking for an all alcohol.
Oh, they sell beer and wine?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But this isn't the same type of license that we were denied for the non-specific license holder.
That was for
That was a beer and wine.
beer and wine.
And all
That was
alcohol is treated a lot more conservatively, isn't it, by the state?
I would think so. I think our number is less for the all alcohol.
Oh yeah, I know it is. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right, well,
Whew, shut the door.
Rover.
not mine. Okay. Then with that, all right, are there any other questions or discussion items or people that we want to hear from the warrant articles that you've seen? Peter?
Yeah, I have a question and then perhaps a request after that. Back to Article B on revolving funds.
Mhm.
What is the funding source for the Stormwater Task Force? Where does the money for that revolving fund come from?
That comes from the sale of the buckets, I think, as well as a grant. I'd have to go back and look at because that's
You're right,
within the
Heather.
bylaw now. It's part of the funding sources you can find right in the bylaws.
That is
Karen,
what
do
the
you know?
funding source is. It is the sale of the compost bins and the rain barrels, and that's the revenue source for that fund.
I would like to, and it probably doesn't have to be in person, and I don't think it should take a substantial amount of time. But I'd be curious as to what we're getting for that $5,000.
The $5,000 is the cap on the fund. I can tell you we've never spent $5,000, and I think right now that fund only has about $2,000 in it at most. And
Okay.
we really haven't spent anything out of the fund. I mean, it's been very limited expenditures taken from there.
And as well limited revenues.
Correct.
Well, if we're not spending money and it's only $2,000, then
Right. It's money. It's revolving funds, money in, money out.
Okay. Do they meet regularly? Does the Stormwater Task Force meet regularly?
Yes.
Yes, normally they meet at least once a month or once a month.
Okay.
Did we lose Michelle?
Nope,
No.
she's muted.
Oh, okay.
I didn't think you wanted to hear my dog anymore.
Oh, thank you. It was just that all of a sudden you disappeared from the pictures. I didn't see you. Where did she go? Okay.
I'm back.
I do have one additional question. So if my note taking is accurate, we have 2 articles that are requesting appropriations that we have not planned for funding for at this point. I'm tracking the primary school and the LED light fixtures. Is that more or less accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Right at this point. You mean in the new revised budget?
Yeah, I mean, as of
Yeah.
today, right?
As of today.
Okay. And do you have any thoughts around, in particular, the primary school?
As far as what that cost would be, I do not.
Well, the cost and the fund source.
Mhm. It would have to, like I said, the only 2 sources would be free cash or tax revenues that I would recommend.
And you don't have an estimate on that cost at this point?
No,
Oh, for the demolition?
it's not for the demolition though.
Is it?
It's to vote.
It's just the wording is actually just to secure estimates for demolition. And
Oh, okay. I
Design.
misunderstood that. Okay.
The design.
it's not the demolition,
Okay. So we would vote on that later.
right?
So that's relatively a small number.
Yeah,
if
it's
that's
got-
what we're
it could
going
be-
after.
It could be
Yeah.
0.
I mean, we already have an estimated number for the remediation of the property. So then then you're looking for the cost of the demolition and removal of the building, which is, again, not big dollars. I've already looked at that 3 years ago. And then it depends on what you want to do to the property afterwards.
Okay. All right. I misunderstood. I thought we were demolishing. I was under the impression that was the goal of the Board of Selectmen, was to come up with a final decision on this for town meeting. But
It's a
What-
step in the process.
I think it's another eggshell being walked on.
it's an iterative step, but it doesn't, in my mind, that doesn't meet the spirit of the goal that I understood
Right.
that had been set.
Heather, I've got a quick question for you also on that article. Do you know, or I can go to Tim Murphy to get an answer on this. I personally would like to see this as a roll call vote at town meeting. And I'm not sure if you could follow through on what the procedure will be or need to be for that to happen, or if it'll
Well,
have to be
wouldn't
called
you-
on the floor.
Wouldn't you have to call that from the floor?
Mhm. Think so.
Wouldn't you have to take I would assume you would have to.
Okay, I'll speak with the town moderator because I want that to happen.
Can't even imagine what that would look like. I don't think I've ever been to a town meeting with a roll call vote.
It'd be fun. If
I'm
not
sorry,
time consuming.
That was probably incorrect terminology. I mean a hand vote.
Oh, okay.
I want
Oh, okay,
a
thank you.
definitive count, yay, nay.
Oh, I see.
Sure.
That makes more sense to me. I was just trying to figure out how a roll call vote would go.
Yeah, that would
All
be
right.
fun,
Oh.
wouldn't it?
Be a while.
After
That would be-
11 hours.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, not looking forward to that. All right. So then we can probably step off. Are there any other town manager or finance director reports that you wanted to present at this time?
I will let Karen take it over from here to talk about cash flow analysis and the recommendation to delay payments, tax payments until June 1st and waive penalties and interest.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
The treasurer's office and myself had completed a cash flow analysis for the last quarter of FY20 prior to anything happening with the pandemic. And based upon that, let me rephrase that, not after the pandemic, but before the new legislation came out allowing us to extend due dates on real estate taxes. And based upon the original cash flow that we had done, going to be fine through the end of this fiscal year. We would be able to cover everything. We do have spending freezes in place, and we are looking at everything that's coming through to make sure that it's something that's required at this point in time and not just a want by the departments. But if the selectmen go ahead, which I'm sure that they will, and accept the local option to extend the due date on the taxes, the only thing that would really do to our cash flow is just shift the dollars that we would normally collect towards the end of April, the beginning of May, into the month of May, towards the latter end of May and the beginning of June. So overall, from a cash flow perspective, again, we should be fine through the end of June 2020, but it will be interesting to see what will happen beyond that. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what the state finally decides on with the budget and when we'll start to see those revenues for FY21. So, I mean, right now, through FY20, we will be fine.
Okay, Peter, do you want to go to your specific question, or? I know part of what you had, one of the words you used in there was equity, and I wasn't sure if.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of thoughts on this, and I say this at the risk of sounding like I don't care about the people who are dealing with financial hardships. I absolutely do, and I would lean toward supporting doing this at least so far as the 1st of June. There is a cost associated with this at some point, I would imagine. It sounds like we don't have a dollar figure projected for that, but anytime you're not getting your money on such and such a date, you're now getting it later. Even if that money was sitting in an account someplace, it would be an interest-bearing account. So there's a cost associated with this, and I think that cost, to whatever extent we can, needs to be understood. So that's point number one. Point number two is that we have citizens in Lunenburg that have varying economic predicaments or conditions. I might be under a great deal of financial stress, which there's a recent federal legislation that would allow me to put my mortgage into forbearance for a period of 1 year if I'm under significant financial stress, if I've lost my job as a result of COVID-19. I pay my taxes through an escrow account associated with my mortgage. It's unclear from the legislation as to whether the mortgage company, what are they supposed to do in terms of paying those taxes. But if I were to continue to pay my mortgage and there's ample money in my escrow account the way it's set up to pay that, my bank is not going to give me the option of not paying a payment for another 3 weeks, right? So because people are in different financial conditions based on whether they pay a mortgage or not, if they own the property outright, if those mortgages are escrowed. I think that it's not something that if we were to do, could necessarily be applied equally to all the people in town, just because our financial conditions are different and our finances are set up differently, and not necessarily in a way that would allow us to take advantage of these provisions. So that's a concern that I have. I don't know that it rises to the level of being against it, but I do think it's something that we ought to consider. The other concern that I have here is if we extend the due date from the first week of May to the last day of May, or the first day of June, and then the state goes out and passes additional legislation in May that kicks that can into June or July, well, now we have a whole other issue to deal with. And I understand it will probably take another vote by the Board of Selectmen to deal with, but we will now have created a precedent. So, I don't think that this is a decision that should be taken as lightly or be considered as procedural as it may have been interpreted to be by some folks in town. Anyway, I hope that's understood.
Right, and it's also unclear at this time how many people would take advantage of that or not. Yeah, again, given that anybody who's working and paying a mortgage that's gone. It's probably already on its way.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But yeah, those are good points. Karen, anything more?
No, I don't have anything unless you have something more you want from me at this point. I'm good.
Anything anybody wants from Karen? I don't think so. And I think I guess we can wait until we hear we're going to be hearing from the treasurer. Is that correct at some point?
That was part of the administration, so.
Yeah.
Heather,
Actually,
you can answer that, right?
Well, I just feel like I dropped the ball really poorly on that. Miley had offered to submit to the Finance Committee on a quarterly basis information related to investments. And then that didn't happen, and that was I really feel like I dropped the ball on that. I completely forgot that she had said that one, we had asked for it, and two, she had said she would do it. So I imagine that we'll take that up again when we hear from her. But I also don't know what night you want to do that. So are we anticipating we're just going to do the whole? Everybody on the 30th, that was going to be the last night.
Right.
So
Okay.
we'll do all administration on the 30th?
Yep, that's how it was originally set up, was administration. And I don't know if Mylene typically.
She doesn't normally present, but I mean, I can relay the information to her regarding the cash that you would like to see from her. And I know she knows that, obviously she knows that she said that to you when she was at the meeting, so I can make sure that part of it happens. But I don't think typically she has presented in the past.
Well, I'm also trying to remember when it was that she did present to us. I remember that the question came up at the meeting.
I think she probably came at some point when we were talking about, I can't even remember maybe the investment policy. I think she came to that meeting and she spoke with you at that meeting. And I'm sure that's when she told you that she would provide you with that information, which I can certainly get for you.
Okay, that would be super. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So if there's anybody actually I should ask if there's anybody who's currently attending who is not a member of the committee, if you have any questions at this point about anything that's been presented. And yes. I will unmute you. I don't know if I'm speaking to Phyllis or Carl.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Carl.
Hi, Carl.
Good evening. Hey, I just have a question on the OPEB.
I'm sorry. Before you go, full name and address, please.
Oh, Carl, thank you for the reminder. Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. And on OPEB, and I did watch the selectmen meeting and heard the accountant, I don't know, the auditor report, and he mentioned the discount rate and the effect that our setting by for this account affect the discount rate. But I may have misunderstood, but
Carl, could I interrupt you for a second? We've got somebody with an open mic with a lot of background noise. Okay, it seems to be gone now.
Thank you, Dave. What I thought I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I thought I heard is that when our, let's call it our count that we're setting aside, when that reaches a certain point, that would change our discount rate, meaning that there was some level we had to achieve before there was any impact to discount rate. Did I understand that correctly? And if so, what is that point we have to get at? Is it a percentage of our liability? Is it a absolute number, or does anyone know?
I think Karen's trying to see.
I honestly can't answer that question, Carl. I would have to check with our actuarial and our audit firm to find out what that number is, and I can certainly do that and let you know what I hear back.
Thank you very much. I'm happy you stayed long enough for that question, Karen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
That's it.
Was there anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Then with that, do we have any public comment from anybody on the committee? Seeing none, there is no public comment sitting in the email, and there is no public comment sitting in the chat. Is there any public comment from anybody in the public? Oh, Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm out of order. I did.
You're in the public too. You're at the table, but you're
Okay.
in the public.
Okay. I wanted to mention we skipped over committee reports, and I did want to mention that the school committee has met twice since our last meeting. They had meetings on Saturday, and then they met again last night. The finance director of the school department has intimated that there are additional costs and savings as a result of what's going on with the pandemic, and I personally requested that get rolled up into sort of a single document that can be shared with the public. It has not yet, but I've made that request. Related to that, he announced last night that the school department and other communities that are also contracted with D-Bus service are entering into discussions with D-Bus to basically negotiate some sort of financial agreement associated with the non-delivery of service. Not to make it sound like that's a negative thing. It is what it is. School's not happening. And so there is no resolution to that. It probably is going to take multiple permutations because it's not known if we're going back to school or not this year. But that activity is underway. And we have been told that we will be given some sort of progress reporting as that develops in the coming days and weeks.
Okay. Anything else? Sorry, does anybody else have a committee report? I'm sorry, I closed that window when I was trying to share my screen. I had no idea what was on the agenda. So if there's nothing else, then next week, I assume that we'll just be having more discussions around the budget itself. and any other changes that might have come up in the meantime. We'll anticipate, the other thing, oh, actually, I'm sorry, Dave, let me refer back to you on the request for participation from Stephen Hay and Senator Tran. Is it likely that they will attend a meeting if we invite them in the next few weeks?
I have invited them. I had conversation directly with Representative Hay and contact back and forth by email with Dean Tran. They were Steve's administrative assistant was looking for some information about the number that Lunenburg got assessed by Monty Tech, and I'm not sure if she's gotten that information yet. I'm going to try to contact her tomorrow and see where she's at with that. Secondly, they are interested in coming to a meeting, but I don't have any specifics on when they're going to be available.
Okay, so did you invite them specifically either the 16th, the 23rd, or the 30th?
No, I didn't give them any dates. I just told them that we meet every Thursday and that we're in the process of reworking the entire budget.
Heather, did you want to say something?
I just clarification, because I thought before you had asked that it be with the Board of Selectmen.
I did. Have you reached out to them?
I talked to the chairman, so I didn't know if this was going to be at a finance meeting or a selectmen's meeting.
If they invite them and they go to a selectman meeting, that's fine.
I mean, I can give them that information that it could be either or preferred to be Board of Selectmen.
I mean, it just looked like the Board of Selectmen was like they're I don't know how early the Board of Selectmen could bring them in given their agenda. But yes, I would prefer to do it with the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
But I wasn't sure if that would make more sense to try to do it at a finance committee or a Board of Selectmen meeting. So I guess I would, what's your sense about that?
I guess we'd first see when they're available and we go from there.
Okay.
I guess my preference here is let's not add any sticks to the spokes here. Like if, to my knowledge, the Board of Selectmen haven't discussed inviting them. Maybe that's just an automatic thing and the invitation is open and the door is open and they can come anytime they want. I don't know how the board operates. But I would rather not delay, and we do this at the earliest convenience of the legislators to whichever meeting they can attend.
And
Okay.
my feeling was that it was a financial question that that we're interested in. So I was going on the assumption that we do it in a finance committee meeting. So I will try to pin that down as quickly as I can as to availability.
I had one other.
I'm sorry, Heather, go ahead.
Peter had asked last meeting about funding for the CARES Act and that Fitchburg received. So I reached out to Fitchburg about the $600,000 that they got, and they're part of the CDBG entitlement program. So it's a formula based, and so they were essentially entitled to those funds.
So it's a community development grant?
So we don't get any.
Right.
Okay. Fair enough. Not fair, but it is what it is.
Yeah, but I'll be pursuing if
Thank you for following up, Heather.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll be pursuing if we have any ability to access any type of funding. So.
That would be good. All right, so let me ask you at this point then, from a procedural perspective, should the invitation to the delegation go from the town manager CCing Dave, or should Dave make the invitation CCing the town manager, or does it matter?
Just to bring up a point, Terry, you had initiated that contact, and the only reason you were going to attempt to go through the Board of Selectmen was because you got no response. And it was a
Well, no, I
request
got
for the
response,
finance
but I was
committee.
getting, I was getting the bench. I got a response. It was just, like, yeah, I'm sure we could send somebody, over to talk to you. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Whereas
so-
through these channels, they will come to a finance committee meeting. And I think that was the original intent, honestly.
Oh, you're right. And it was, but I also thought that it would be good information to be shared with the Board of Selectmen as well.
So we can invite them to our meeting. If that's
so I
the
guess-
most expedited way to get them to come to a meeting, I really would like to be able to push in that direction.
Then basically what I would like is an invitation to go out that would ask them if they're available on a Tuesday date certain, Thursday date certain, Tuesday date certain, or Thursday date certain, and have them pick a date. And if
Okay.
it's a Tuesday, then we'll join the Board of Selectmen. If it's a Thursday, then the Board of Selectmen can come play with us.
Mhm.
If they're interested, yeah. So that's my sense at this point, so, yeah.
Heather,
so
we can
I
have
guess
a private conversation about it as to how you want to handle that.
That would be good. Thank
Okay.
you so much actually, Dave, thank you for taking that on. So I appreciate that. Then with that, if there's nothing else, then I'm happy to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
So, second.
All right, and this requires a roll call. So, Dave,
aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and I for myself. So that concludes this meeting. We'll see you next week. Have a great night.
Thank you.